to support it. So we should get out of oil and gas subsidies, we should not be in renewable subsidies. Indirect subsidy by way of basic research. One of the strengths of Canada is its research and innovation economy. That's also been crippled by cuts by the Conservatives. But basic research is where innovations, for instance, battery technology. One of the most important things in order to realize the full potential of renewables is batteries, because both wind and solar are intermittent. That's something that wouldn't be a direct subsidy to industry, but the technology that would be developed by Canadian entrepreneurs, just as we've seen in specific cases like space, exploration, robotics, these are places where Canada can play a leading role. And you're exactly right, it's something that's going to become much more important in the future. And so if we're in on the ground floor, that's something that will set us up to be in a very positive relationship with the rest of the world in terms of the knowledge that everyone is going to need.
We have, am I supposed to? We subsidize oil and gas, and we still subsidize it. It's been heavily subsidized in the past, it's diminishing, and we have an agreement with the G20 that we will remove all subsidies by the year 2020. At the same time that we were giving subsidies to oil and gas, we lost the person who created the most efficient solar cell in the world. He was in Canada, he was in Ontario between 1996 and 2006, could not get funding, and Germany took him. He built the manufacturing plants in Germany that produce the solar cells and sell all across Europe. We have just lost an engineering, a woman to the New York, who figured out a way to have solar panels tilt to follow the sun, using nothing but 4-liter jugs, like milk jugs, dripping with water dripping through a filter. And she figured out a way, I tried to Google the methodology and it didn't say, but she figured out a way to have, based on the dripping of the water through these jugs and through a filter, to get a solar panel to tilt to follow the sun. And this can be implemented in any third world country easily. She's now in New York. I believe that with all the oil and gas subsidies being eliminated, we will have a lot of money to subsidize our own renewable energy. You know, I have a vision. The foothills has the most solar power and the most wind power in all of Canada, and you know, almost all in all of the world. And I have a vision of why don't we have the most creative minds in Canada, and why don't we bring the green energy companies to the foothills and to the Crow's Nest Pass and let them run a 4-month experiment to see who can create the most electricity. Let them merge companies, let them create new companies, let them exchange technology. And yeah, instead of Woodstock, let's have it Foothills 2016. And you know, we could have people who would be testing bearings to see which are the most robust bearings to handle the wind that goes galing through the Crow's Nest Pass. And you know, I'm sure we could get some land from 2 or 3 farmers to set up tests like matrices of solar panels, and just to find out who can do it the best, and have it as just a friendly competition of who can generate the most electricity over the summer. It's just a vision of mine. I don't know if it'll come true, but you know, this is what I'm thinking of. I believe that we have so much that we can offer the world here in Canada, and we haven't been doing it, we've been muzzled, and let's move on and put our energy forth.
Yeah, this question was the most applicable one for me to speak about, and so I'm going to answer it in a way that you're probably not expecting. You know, in my introduction, you heard me say that I run a National Renewable Energy Association, and for every day of the past 8 years, I wake up every day and advocate for support for renewables. And so you've heard some good reasons why we should support them, so I'm going to tell you something completely different, maybe a different way to think about this. The NDP's platform is $100 million for renewables. I think we can probably do a lot better than that as well and tap into some other money that the NDP is putting in. Because this isn't just about renewables, this isn't about subsidizing oil, which oil and coal and natural gas are highly subsidized. I think we've all made that fairly clear. This isn't about subsidizing one and not the other. Renewable energy is going to solve a lot of other things. We talked about the health. We are allowing petrochemicals and hydrocarbons to be burned, and we should be subsidizing renewables as fast as we can to get off the things that are harming our health and costing us money in healthcare, in drugs, and obviously in health visits. What about climate change? We are spending so much money. You've heard all the parties talk about infrastructure. Why are we having to spend all this new money on infrastructure? Well, one, because the Harper government, of course, hasn't been putting any money in infrastructure. However, the vast change is happening because of climate change, because of burning hydrocarbons, when you could be using renewable energy, are costing us more, far more for infrastructure and mitigation and fixing things than putting some money into renewable energy. There's whole countries right now that are running on renewable energy. There's whole provinces that have gotten off the hydrocarbon fix. This is not a simple question. You know, as written, should we subsidize it? Again, I advocate for that every day. My answer is simple. Of course we should, but I think we should be thinking deeper about why we should. It's not about capitalization and funding one and not funding the other. This is a different game we're playing now. The earth is changing. Climate change and health, the air, the water, all those things count. When people talk to me about their electricity price, one of the first things they say, oh my gosh, if we use renewables and we have to subsidize it so much, the price is going to go up. And I ask them to think about it as a little bit of a bigger box, because you're right, probably prices may go up for electricity, for that. However, prices will go down for taxes, for healthcare, for the infrastructure. We have to think about our tax dollar isn't designated to one thing. Our tax dollar goes to fixing all of the things in Canada. And we can use those tax dollars more wisely. I love that we have the option through technology to use renewable energy now, but I really don't want to limit the argument to say we should be taking subsidies away from one and giving it to another. This is about fixing so many other things: infrastructure, climate, water, environment. And we can do all that by simply changing what we use for electricity. It's that easy. The other countries are using it already. We're the only ones stuck in this paradigm of we must use oil. I'm not against oil, but you can use oil for other things than burning it. Let's not burn our coal, let's make steel out of it. Let's not burn our natural gas, let's make products out of it, plastics. Let's not burn our oil. You know, let's not burn coal. Our smart cars right now, anyone who's driving a smart car, unfortunately in Alberta, doesn't really do a lot of good, because a lot of our electricity comes from natural gas and coal. We need to fix our electricity system, and we can do it profitably, create more jobs, and do it safer for the environment. I'm really looking forward to what tomorrow looks like.
Well, we can thank the Green Party for even having this discussion about renewables and doing the consumption and production of renewable energy, because it was the Green Party who's been pushing for this conversation all along. So I think the important word in that question was whether the federal government should subsidize the consumption and production. What the federal government should first of all be doing is taking a leadership role on letting us all in Canada know that that is the direction that we should all be pushing towards, not keep looking back to the oil and gas industry and the coal industry and keep subsidizing those industries. We need to take a leadership role, and that's what the federal government is there to do. In the meantime, there should absolutely be transitional subsidies to help fast track these new technologies to be brought on board. And one of the platforms that the Green Party will be bringing forward will be offering free tuition for all post-secondary education and for upgrading their skills. And as it relates specifically to the First Nations, to reform the post-secondary education funding, including the removal of the 2% annual cap on increased funding for all First Nations and Inuit students. So this is the role the federal government should be taking, is facilitating all of us to move into those new technologies and into the renewable energy systems, and then as these take hold, the subsidies, whatever subsidies were required, will fade away. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, I believe. Next question. We start with Romy again, right? And we go back this way. Okay, can I please ask you to state your name? This isn't court, so don't get nervous. Family court. Just kidding. Okay, I would like to ask you to introduce yourself and then get into your question. Okay.
Good morning. Welcome to Tsuut'ina Nation. I am Tanya Crow-Sheldon. I'm the Consultation Director for Tsuut'ina Nation. I see a lot of files on a daily basis. I deal with a lot of legislations. When the government changes their policy, I see the changes in those. The duty to consult, as you're aware, occurred in 2004 when the Haida won their case. In 2005, 633 First Nations across Canada developed their consultation offices under their leadership and under the direction of their leadership. So my question is, how do you view consultation? Because I deal with it on a daily basis. I know what's working and what's not working. So I want to hear what the four of you have to say about consultation. And the duty to consult.
Thank you, Tanya. The word consultation, first of all, has to start with respect and understanding. And this ties back into the concept of proportional representation. If we implement a system of proportional representation, then the people we put in ministerial positions will have expertises in the fields that they're in, not just any person put in a portfolio. And in the case of the First Nations people, it isn't for me to tell you how things should work. You are the one who has to come and tell me. So I'm your representative. And so therefore the consultation process is about me as your representative, taking your knowledge and applying it and bringing it forward and letting the people in the various departments know what works for you and what doesn't work for you. It's not for me to tell you how we want it to work for you. So that really, to me, the two key things of that is respect and understanding.
Have you ever noticed how some companies are proud that they've hired a consultant? You know, let's go hire a consultant. You know, you hire consultants because you actually want their advice. You've already, even before you've hired them, kind of acknowledged that they know better than you know. So consultation right away, meaningful consultation is that you're not just open-minded, you're not neutral, you're actually thinking that the other people that you're speaking with have a lot of value to add and probably have this solution. And so this has worked well in my own life. I know the NDP strongly believes in nation-to-nation respectful relationship to begin with, but that very word, I really want to stress how important it is for the First Nations, Indigenous people to push on that word. Because meaningful consultation doesn't mean I get to just check off my box. I've come and, you know, had an open house, and maybe we took notes, and maybe we looked really intent. That's not what consultation is. The root of the word, the Latin word, is that we actually have more respect for the person giving the consultation than we do ourselves, and they have a lot of value to add. And I like to get back to that type of feeling. Let's all be actually proud of hiring consultants. Let's all be actually taking it seriously. This is not unachievable. This is just the table stakes and the way it should be. It's not been that way under the Harper government, as you know.
I'm looking through the 94 calls to action, and I'm trying to see what you're meaning by consultation. And consultation for child welfare. I know that you know, children that are kept in with their families. This is I know that this is what First Nations want, and you know, the government should not be interfering. The government should leave it up to you, and you have the resources, you have the elders to help. Consultation and education. I know that you want to you know, lead your own education programs and your own language and culture education, and also that we're supposed to have it within our own you know, within our own curriculums, and that is happening, but I don't believe it's happening across the board. Like, a lot of teachers are bringing it in. Consultation for health. I know that the bands and the nations are trying to build their own services, and they are building their own services, and you know, we can consult. There can be a transition of knowledge and back and forth, so the consultation. It's clear that you are a people. You are a people with such great wisdom and such history. I feel like we took it from you. And you have taken it back. You are very powerful. And I feel it right now.
Question. The IDA decision you referred to, I think if anything that has been strengthened by more recent developments like the Aboriginal title cases in BC. There's a recognition that the first occupation, the first claim on those resources and that land belongs to the First Nations. As a principal, a lot of my position involves dealing with human resources issues, and probably the office you work in deals with that as well. They're always difficult. Person to person, it becomes even more complex when there's different levels of government involved, but the principle of respect, of being determined that you will find the best solution for everyone from the beginning, rather than a power group deciding on the outcome and then hearing from some people and going ahead with it anyways. That's the pattern that's been in evidence. To me, consultation means, as has been said here already, a genuine desire to understand, and not everyone in personal or in government relationships can get all of what they want all the time, right? There are competing interests that need to be balanced. But if the outcome at the end should be the best possible for everyone, and those who are not getting everything they asked for should clearly understand why that is, how that fits into the big picture. And that can only be accomplished through meaningful dialogue and really listening, trying to understand one another.
Morning. My name's Jean Crowchild, and I work for Tsuut'ina Nation as the Treaty Initiatives Coordinator. As you're aware now that there's a lot of First Nation issues across the board on almost everything from daily life to issues as whole. And there's over 600 First Nations across Canada. And you guys have been talking, some of you talked about nation-to-nation discussions. My question is, how are you going to implement those discussions? And how are you going to keep it, besides duty to consult in that? There's 11 treaty areas. Treaty 6 is spread across Alberta and Saskatchewan. There's Treaty 8, there's the Northern Territories, there's the BC Union of Chiefs, there's all of them. I just need to know how you're going to do that if your party gets into the That's my question.
Catholic, I guess I have the edge because I've been whispering all day, so that's probably that's probably good. The NDP has not just said they're going to strike a committee and study the issue. Tom Mulcair, our leader himself, will be chairing a new committee, and he is going to be he's going to be involved physically at the table. So of all the leaders, he's been making more time for First Nations, not just during the election cycle, but for the past time he's been in power. He's had more meetings with First Nations than any other topic every day for the past.
All three.
Fantastic.
In Manitoba, Edmonton, and in AFN. That's why I'm asking.
That's
you
right.
to answer the question.
And so he was just up in Edmonton the other day. So one of the ways is, I heard actually at the Blackfoot Confederacy when I was here last Friday, one of the ladies in the audience was actually asking about refugees coming into Canada, and she said, it's our Canada as well, why can't we sit on that advisory board to actually talk about quotas coming into Canada? And so these are the types of the ideas the NDP does want to implement. So at the very highest level, having the Prime Minister who is inviting not just consultation, but people to actually make the decisions This isn't about thinking about what we want to consult about. This is actually about sitting around a very small table and making the decisions together. That's what we mean by nation to nation. It's not us against somebody else. We're actually all at the table together. So implementing the UN Declaration of Indigenous Peoples, I've also heard that if we just can get that right, everything will fall from that. Respect for languages, health, education, and status of women. There's some pretty basic things that the other countries are already operating at and that we've actually said no to. So I think one of the first things we want to do is bring in the UN Declaration for Indigenous Peoples. We're also spending money on implementing the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. That wasn't just a study that we should just put on the shelf. That's something we need to be living right now. And I'm really happy that the NDP has actually put money against that. So those are some of the ideas that we have that we're going to start right away. Treat everybody at the table. It's not going to be we think of the ideas and we bring it back to you. You'll be at the table. Thank you.
Goes to Romy, and then we go to Tanya.
Thank you, Queen.
Finish off with Mark.
I'm going to quote from Ms. May, and that will answer this question. The Green Party welcomes First Nations, Métis, and Inuit leaders to work in partnership with federal, provincial, territorial, and municipal leaders on our proposed Council of Canadian Governments. As the partners at the table, Indigenous leaders will decide how best to allocate financial resources within their communities, whether it be in healthcare, housing, or working to develop a responsible resource development strategy that meets the needs of Indigenous peoples. The Green Party plan will also include conducting a timely and good faith negotiations to settle land and rights issues and work with First Nations to find innovative solutions for implementing treaties and negotiating self-government agreements and find acceptable ways to phase out the India Act with the consent of the First Nations. Thank you.
I have a lot of things in front of me, for how we're going to support First Nations, like housing, safety, policing, child welfare and education, but I believe your question was, how are we going to implement it with the 620 nations, and like you're saying, spread across provinces. So I don't have any notes in front of me, but I understand that sometimes, some things have to be done in cooperation with provinces, and it's an immense project, and I know that you are all individual nations with individual voices, and so it is a difficult task, and something that we'll have to work very hard to keep your individual identities intact with the agreements.
I will be honest, I think the answer is, I don't know. And I don't know that anybody does. The problem is the entire structure of First Nations governance in Canada is so ill-defined. We have a constitution that talks about federal and provincial responsibilities and doesn't talk about First Nations. We have an Indian Act that considers First Nations as wards of the state. We have treaties that consider First Nations as independent nations. We have groups like AFN. Some nations consider themselves represented well by AFN, others would rather do their own thing. So to just say this is what a nation is, and I don't think there's an answer for that. So that probably means there's no quick solution, and there certainly isn't. But where we need to start at the foundational level is to sort that out. What does it mean to be a First Nation in Canada? You are voting. You have a relationship with the federal government. Education and healthcare are so fundamental to your people. Those are provincial matters. So it's not defined how that needs to work. And I think that opening the Constitution, I know every party shies away from that, and maybe I can safely say things like that because there's not going to be a CHP government, so won't have to back this off. But we need to start with the fundamentals. We need to define the place of First Nations in Canada through a dialogue, through a meaningful consultation, and from that respectful basis, we can go forward seeking solutions.
I had a question. My name is Anne Crane. I work with the Indian Residential School Resolution House Support Worker for 7 years. I was just wondering on the, well, we know the settlement agreement was re-traumatizing and re-victimizing the survivors. So many things went wrong in that. And I was just wondering about what does your party, how does your party feel about the day school class action? Because it was the same mandate as the Indian residential school. Well, you do to honor the cause of action, section 12, section 13 and 14 on the cause of actions of truth and reconciliation.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know, I
Sorry, I
don't know
was
what's,
gonna lay it out, but you beat me to it. Got in there.
I don't know what section 12 and section 13 are, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's the revitalization and preservation of the languages and cultures right across Canada. I feel there was not enough money put toward the languages and the culture and the healing component, because the settlement agreement itself and the model that the government developed was a band-aid solution. But it never really addressed the internal giving back. You mentioned giving back what was taken from us. And section 13 and 14 in the cause of action addresses the language and culture preservation and revitalization. What will your parties do to honor that, you know, in terms of supporting financially? And also the day school class action was kind of a part two question, but the day school class action shouldn't even be in court. It should have been just settled with the First Nations people, period.
You know, when I was at Picanee, I noticed that they have their own culture classes and their own language classes in the schools. And you know, I'm no expert on this, and I would be wanting your input. But I guess maybe through the school system we could be funding you sufficiently so that you can have the language classes and the culture classes to teach the, you know, the young children, well, from kindergarten to grade 12. But I really hope that my party, I don't have anything in particular in front of me, but I really hope that my party has a strong platform to revitalize Native culture and Native languages, because we don't want to lose them. I know that the numbers of people who are fluent is getting less and less, and maybe with technology implementation as well, if you have the funding for that, it would be another way to help preserve the language.
We also don't have specific policy on that as a party, but certainly the importance of language. I have been careful in my emails back and forth here to get the spelling of Tsuut'ina right. That's coming from your own nation, right? The understanding of it, we are our own language, the rules, the transliteration of it wasn't correct. That's something that somebody in Ottawa can't develop. They don't know that background, right? So it has to come from the nations. There should be support for that. And I think the most important place for that culture to be passed on is in the home. That's at the root of the residential schools crisis, was the removal of children from their home environment, from that culture that's transmitted through the family. So receiving the wisdom of the elders, of parents. We haven't talked too much about specific policies, but one that the CHP would implement is a $1,000 a month family care allowance. People across Canada say if they had the option, they would raise their children at home. Because of economics or because of other reasons, they feel the need to get a second job or to leave their children in daycare, even though they would rather raise them at home. And so we would make that possible for them, also for infirm or elderly family members. And it's in that place, with respect for the wisdom of parents and grandparents, bringing that culture across to students and seeing that then valued also in the school system. But I think it needs to start at home.
I'm also going to start just with a quote from Ms. May again. The Green Party strongly supports the findings of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and that a national inquiry into murdered, missing Indigenous women will be created and immediately implemented. As well, we will provide new funding, federal funding for culturally appropriate education in traditional languages. And I was already immediately struck and very pleased to hear how many of you were speaking in your native language. And on a personal level, why I take that very much to heart is my husband is what would be considered a First Nation people back in Iraq. He's a Syrian, and his language was the language of Jesus. And his people have been systematically, ethnically cleansed from the Middle East over these last 30 years. And his language is unfortunately on the way out, and it causes a great deal of anguish within his community to try to keep a language alive that's spoken since the time of Jesus. So I really appreciate your community's efforts to recapture that culture, because in the very acts that the government has done to try to divorce you and strip you of your culture and your language in the way to break you, it really, when you see how it's done and the effects it has on your community and the generations that follow. Again, you know, from the personal example of my husband's family, I mean, his mother and father came from families that would have 10, 12 children. They were a very vigorous community. They all had really great roles in their community. And in them having to be scattered to the wind across the world, they are now families, within 2 generations of this happening, are now families that don't even have children. They don't even have spouses anymore. And it has completely destroyed their culture and their cohesiveness as a people. So I applaud the First Nations for having stood strong through this systematic assault that has taken place to your community over all this time under the role that you've been under. It's a shame of us. I feel very shamed as a Canadian to have even been along this journey without actively participating in that, but just being along this journey. And one of the things that really has come out here in the education, we need to be educated as to what has happened, and Mark spoke of that. Not only are your children not being educated and our young children on what has happened with your community. I grew up here, went to school here, I never heard anything about the plight of the First Nations. I lived next door, I grew up in Lakeview. I've been here right next to you as a community member, and I didn't know about your plights until well into adulthood. And so education and maintaining your language and culture is absolutely imperative to all of your First Nations across Canada. Thank you.
Thanks. It gives me I guess a lot of pleasure to wrap up on this question, because I was mentioning that Tom Mulcair has been at this every day that he's been in elected office as the official opposition, and he's really not just thought through the issues, we've made it a priority in our budget. So we're the only party right now to actually put dollars towards how we're going to address this. So $8 million right now has been pledged to Truth and Reconciliation Commission undertaking those findings, but an additional $68 million has been set aside for the revitalization of Indigenous languages. And so $68 million just for languages. And I think that's just the tip of the iceberg. We're lucky that we're also putting aside $375 million for critical infrastructure such as schools. It also includes water and affordable housing. But you need a place to teach the languages as well, certainly at home, but also formally in the school. So this is the type of intent that the NDP has, that we're not just shaking our heads solemnly, we're not just coming to meetings, we're not just talking about it, like we're actually prioritizing it in the budget. And I think what we've seen from the Conservatives is that this is not a priority. I mean, they're on record saying that things like missing and murdered Indigenous women is not a priority. We've seen the Liberals announce funding for Indigenous peoples and then take it away again when their budget came out. And the NDP wants to lead. This is our #1 issue right now, making sure that there is a Canada for all. And I'll go back to my own campaign slogan, Foothills for All. Our party is 35 seats away to forming government. The other major parties, such as the Liberals and other people at the table, have more than 100 seats to gain on the Conservatives. We are best suited to get proportional representation and to take care of all of our commitments to nation. And I'm looking forward to having that change on October 19th. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to introduce Nicole Robertson. She has some critical information on voting.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I am grateful to be here on Tsuut'ina Nation lands and in the territory of Treaty 7. I am here on behalf of a grassroots organization called Rock the Indigenous Vote. We are mobilizing our people and assisting to get them out to vote. We're a non-partisan. We're helping to educate our Indigenous peoples, because this historically is the first time that our people are going to be voting in high numbers. And so we're looking at trying to vote in a party that's going to be assisting us in our issues. As mentioned earlier, missing and murdered Indigenous women. It's unacceptable that there's over 1,500 that we know of that are missing and murdered in this country. And recently, the Conservative Party, and specifically Harper, had mentioned that the majority of cases are solved, and this is what he's telling Canadians this past week. And to me, that's an absolute outright lie. And I think that we need to be looking at voting for a party that's going to represent our interests, that include the UN Declaration on Indigenous Rights, to the 94 recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and many others that are close to our heart, that of course includes land and water and food security. So these are bread and butter issues. They're a matter of life and death in certain situations. And to eradicate poverty is huge. I think that's the #1 issue in the urban and also on First Nations. So I believe that this group, and I'm included in it, we've come together this past couple of weeks, and I don't know if you've seen it on Facebook and on Twitter. It's Rock the Indigenous Vote. There's approximately 1,300 people that are members, and we're looking at doing a rally here in Harper's, your guys' territory, and his constituents, live bordering the nation. And so we're going to be doing one of our last rallies here. And that's going to be on Thursday, the 15th, which is next Thursday. And we're looking at a location, and we're looking at inviting all peoples, not just Indigenous peoples, but all peoples that support us, that are our allies, and to get out and to bring also drummers and people that want to celebrate with us, that we're going to help in this coming federal election and make change and make it happen. So I invite all of you, and to get the word out, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, and we also have a website called rocktheindigenousvote.weebly.com. So I just want to thank you for your time, and I'm happy to see that you all are here, minus the Conservatives. They have that missing in action at every Indigenous panel that they've been invited to, including the Aboriginal People's Television Network Town Hall. So that says a lot, and that's my own views. And so I just think that we need to raise the bar, we need to have justice, and we need to be heard. So rock the Indigenous vote, peoples. Thank you.
You know what I did? I did a major faux pas in an Indian country. I have to backtrack a little bit and say, okay, we have one distinguished guest here that really needed to ask a question in the panel, so I have to...
Thank you, Kevin. As he mentioned, I am Cree within Tsuut'ina. I always say how I got here. It was the days when transportation was difficult, and my husband asked me, okay, come home with me, after refusing how many times, but I made it here, and I got lost, and I got stuck here for 44 years. With 3 happy children, and I lost one, and I have 8 grandchildren, and 1 Tapan, that's great-grandchild. But anyways, my concern is, as someone else has mentioned, is First Nations have lived within a systemic government that outlined, do this, do that. Whereas our governance is, if you read it up, is like the medicine wheel, and it's very simple. You have the spiritual element of our people, our social element, our economic element, and our leadership that could be local, global, and those were followed within my ancestors. I really had a hard time within my education system. I was part of the residential school, and 2 years of it was plenty for me. I was very confused. And luckily, my father told me, you are going to be taught by a non-Cree person. So, but never forget your Cree. That's where my resilience came in. So along the way, it was really, if you follow, and I'm sure you took it in your sociology or psychology, your Maslow concept. We are at the very bottom. We don't have our basic needs in order to reach our potential. And how many more? It's going to take years before the reconciliation recommendations are going to be fulfilled. Sorry is not enough, because I have felt it, and the government has utilized the alcohol and drugs against us by lifting it in the early 50s, I believe. And I think, simple as that, review what is the medicine wheel. I call it the circle of life. And also review the Maslow theory that everybody knows. If First Nations can reach that potential, I'm sure you will see a different, the elements will change. Although our spiritual is what keeps us intact, but you'll see the social change. You'll see the economic change and the leadership. I think it's in the best interest of any government that takes place to work hand in hand with First Nations. Because according to the treaties, you often see the picture of the first comer shake hands with First Nations. We need that a reality. The shake hands to be official, and that is with the treaty rights. And I am big on treaty rights, and also the social structure of our people. We cannot move easily into our economics and our leadership, because that's how the sun moves and the world moves. We cannot, right now, often we have to move back to fix up the social structure of our people. And so having that, and I've heard the NDP talk about what kind of funding is going to be available for the reconciliation recommendations. I am going to say it's going to take years. It's 7 generations. It will, after the 7 generations have healed, you will see. And I'm not sure if this is a comment, but if you have a question, you can surely answer to my comment if you want. Hi for being here and listening to us.
We have 2 minutes if you want to address her. And any final goodbyes and thank yous, you can get into that right at this moment, please.
I guess I'll just provide my response to that is, I really think Canada changed when Idle No More, which originated in the First Nations community, started. Because your numbers now are a lot bigger than you think they are. Because you have Canadians, Harper called us, you know, new stock, old stock, it doesn't matter. You have a lot of Canadians now who believe in the same things that you've been fighting for 450 years since Confederation. And I'm really looking forward to getting Canada back for the people. Canada right now the wealth is concentrated in the corporations. Only 20% of all jobs are in corporations, and yet the corporations, with their endless and excessive tax cuts and CEO tax loopholes, all the power right now is being concentrated in businesses, and yet it's Canadians who live in our country. And so your movement ignited a fire across not just First Nations, but across Canadians. And yes, it may take 7 generations, but you know what, we have to start. And this election is about starting, and I'm really looking forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley. I'll just first start by saying maybe you were the one who got the ring road going so you could find your way back home. I want to really pick up on your speaking about the 4 corners of spiritual, social, economic, and leadership. And we can see by your wisdom that you've understood that we need those 4 corner posts in our lives. You in your nation, you have held on to your spiritual strength to get you through the other 3. And here, us in the West, we've gone to the economic one, and we've lost our spirituality. We've lost our social consciousness. We've lost our leadership in that process. So really, the journey for reconciliation, the journey forward is for all of us to come with and come back to balance. And it really is, I think, singularly the reason I came into this as a candidate. And I came into this as a candidate in the most literal sense of the word, a leap of faith, to hope to bring balance back to our country and our people in this country. I also want to, on a personal note, my belief is if we're not all well, none of us are well. But what I also want to do is I want to take the opportunity in these closing statements, because it's not for me to speak to you, for you. I would like your people to speak for you. And in the Green Party, we are very proud to have a number of First Nations candidates. And I'm going to quote from 2 of them. I'm going to first quote from Brenda Sayer, who's a candidate for North Island, Powell River. She says, "For too long, First Nations have struggled to assert their rights and jurisdictions without federal government political will to ensure their constitutional rights are protected and implemented. It is time for the Government of Canada to work closely and collaboratively with First Nations to work out these issues. It should not take over 20 years to settle long-standing grievances." And I'd also like to quote from Fran Hunt-Chinucci, who is from Cowichan, Malahat, Langford. "I am proud to stand as a Green Party candidate because of our leaders' unwavering commitment to Aboriginal rights and title, defending the coastlines, healing the planet, and protecting the health and well-being of all of our people. The Green Party platform goes deeper than financial commitments and promises to First Nations. It provides a vision for authentic nation-to-nation building, where Canadian leaders work towards reconciliation and joint prosperity." I want to thank all of you who have invited and allowed us to have the pleasure of being on your treaty land. I also will comment on the gifts. I certainly would not have wanted to bring a gift because I don't want to look like I'm bribing you, but I very much welcome the fact that you are so generous to give us a gift for coming here. Really, the gift is ours that you have allowed us to be here and speak with you. So I applaud your efforts. I applaud the Indigenous rights. Rob, thank you. Thank you so much.
I mentioned already the importance of culture and family, and that core value has been disrupted so traumatically. Certainly it's going to be a matter of a lot of time and a lot more pain before we work through that as a nation. But I want to point out some encouraging things. Certainly one of the most inspiring people who I went to university with in my education program was a Kainai lady, 2 young children, working 3 jobs, and full-time university to get an education degree. as she knew she needed to get that influence to make a difference. I look around at the leadership here, and despite all of the trauma, despite the handicaps that have been put in their way, the young people and their involvement in governance here is very, very encouraging. And as First Nations across Canada, you have such a reserve of youth, and I think there is reason for optimism in that. I will close with a thank you to all of you for being here. It's a privilege for me to be on Tsuut'ina land, to hear from you, to gain a little more understanding. And perhaps just a note of caution, I am not in a place with authority to say this, but the frustration, the discouragement that you feel as a result of the traumas of the past is real, and we cannot deny that. But there's a very real danger of that hardening into hatred. And in order for us to move forward as a nation, that dialogue, it needs to go both ways. There needs to be an understanding, and it's the optimism, the courage, the resiliency that we see that will give us the strength to get through that and go forward, and I look forward to seeing it happen. Thank you.
So, you were the people who are holding your spiritual path, and the Liberal government is going to help in very substantial ways with the social in education funding. That's something that we can do to help, and we want to make it very stable and very secure funding. So we have an initial immediate new investment of $515 million per year in core annual funding for First Nations K-12 education, and that will rise to over $750 million per year by the end of our first mandate. There will be an immediate new investment of $500 million over the next 3 years for First Nations education infrastructure. We also know that there's a lot of people who are unable to go to post-secondary. There's a lineup. We're going to have an additional $50 million in annual support to the post-secondary student support program, which will start immediately and provide financial assistance to Indigenous students who want to attend post-secondary. There will be substantial new funding to promote, preserve, and enhance Indigenous languages and culture, and working collaboratively to include Aboriginal and treaty rights, residential schools, and the contributions of Indigenous peoples to Canada in classroom learning. As well, our Canada Child Benefit will also help you, because we are, instead of having a universal child care where we're, Harper was giving checks to millionaires, our Canada Child Benefit will benefit lower income and middle income families. And it'll be like the baby bonus of the old days, where it depended on your income and the number of children, how much money you got. So that will also help your communities considerably. So I just wanted to tell you that real substantial help is coming from the Liberal government, or from the Liberal Party, sorry. I'd just like to thank you all for inviting all of us here, and it's a real pleasure, and I feel a deep sense of friendship and love in this room.
Thank you. How about a round of applause? Your final round of applause. I want to ask Diane McGuinness to give the remarks on behalf of the department, and also ask staff to assist her to award you with some gifts. Everyone.
Thanks to everyone who's here, who's attending at Tsuut'ina, some of the Tsuut'ina people and the other people who are here. And thanks to Kevin for looking after the session for us and helping to provide some of the guidance for us up here at the podium. Tsuut'ina is, I just want to share that Tsuut'ina Nation is not endorsing a political party, nor advocating for First Nations to vote. It is important that all First Nation citizens have free, prior, and informed consent when participating in any vote. The Tsuut'ina Nation has the facility available to host a forum so that other constituents' subject matter will not overshadow First Nation issues, as First Nation items are distinct in nature. And what we talked about, or what was brought up today, I guess, unless a person follows your campaign every day and every meeting that you attend, it's really hard for an individual like myself or others here to kind of get a grasp on the standings of each party. Us people, the people here that live here in the community, the grassroots people, we pretty much know what the issues are. We'd need more than a couple of hours to talk about them. Lots of our issues are internal. We have to look after them. Nobody else can look after those. There's other issues pertaining to bigger issues regarding treaty and regarding pertaining to health and to education that severely impacts our people on a daily basis. I was at a health conference earlier last week where some issues of fentanyl and deaths that occurred from those drug overdoses have occurred in lots of our communities. And then the issues of suicide and issues of just like poverty. There's lots of poverty in our communities. So these are the things that undermine, I guess, the progress that we need to strive towards. We're always lacking in education funding. We're lacking in health promotions that could alleviate some of the health issues that we deal with on a daily basis here in our community. We have elders that need special care. And I'm really worried about the health in our community, in our treaty. I'm really concerned about the Health Canada Act being amended without without our involvement in there. What is that going to do to our treaty right? We stand, lots of us people, we stand on the treaty. We're here because of treaty. We have the land because of treaty, and we're tax free because of the treaty. I think that I think the parties that are being represented here, that are parties of Canada, and their people that elect them need to always be involved with the First Nations, not just when there's a federal election that's taking place. And I think all of us, I think we're all pretty much on the same page. I heard you, I was taking notes as you were speaking, each of you, and I kind of made a little list of what was brought up, and a lot of stuff was covered. The only thing that really wasn't addressed was health. I'm really concerned about that, like severely concerned about that. So everyone talked, there was issue, what was discussed was about the women, the children, even the animals, protocol, the 94 recommendations and the truth and reconciliation, environment and the renewable energy, businesses that could spring out of that, consultation, the UN declaration, that's part of, for all Indigenous people in the world, and the missing and murdered women on education. So all of these subject items were touched on in each of your presentations, and I'd just like to state that for me, it's I'm not really a voter in federal elections. I don't think I might have voted once, but I don't really remember. But I've always been involved with the community aspect of our relations with our community here. I'm a grassroots person. My dad is a World War II veteran, so my views have always been, I've always had a world view growing up. And my mother was a traditional woman here in our community. And both of them are our Tsuut'ina people. And I carry that with me, and that's what I stand on today. Like when I'm talking in front of people, that's what I stand on, what I was raised with, and how I was brought up. And basically the Tsuut'ina people have a really high work ethic. We're strong and we work like 24/7. That's the one thing about the Tsuut'ina people, because we come from the beavers. The beaver animals is one of our symbols. And that's where we come from, and we work like that. That's why we're able to have a casino. We're not lucky. We're just not, you know, it's not because any government favored us or anything. It was hard work to get a casino. It was hard work to get the hotel, hard work to do the golf courses, and hard work to finish that agreement on the highway. So it's not, you know, it has nothing to do with luck. It's hard work, dedicated people that were here before I was here, you know, our ancestors who signed treaty on our behalf. Our chief bullhead who signed a treaty, in case you don't know, was one of the only chiefs in all of Canada that unilaterally moved us from the original lands where we signed it at Blackfoot Crossing, and moved us here because he had visionaries that worked with him. And the visionaries told him that our people will die if we stay where we were. So he moved us here, and we've been here ever since. And so we have the mountains, the water, the grass, everything. The trees are here, the animals, to sustain us to who we are today. So I'm really grateful that everyone's been here, that shared in this session of forum that Tsuut'ina legislation, well, Tsuut'ina Nation actually is hosting. We just facilitate the process. We're the technical people that help Tsuut'ina Chief and Council in a lot of their work that they do. Thank you very much, everyone, and especially to Kevin. Kevin and I worked together for a long time when he was a band counselor, plus he was a nation administrator. And you know, the other staff that are here, there's lots of other staff. Shirley is retired from education, but this lady committed her whole life to education, in pursuit of education for our young kids, and same with Anne. So thank you very much. I'm feeling very emotional right now because this is, I think, a new thing for us. Thank you.
I know it was a bit out of practice for me to keep sitting down on a chair. I have real bad knees, and it's not from hockey or steer wrestling, it's from always praying and begging the wife, right? Okay, so with that, I'll leave you with that. Always look for guys with bad knees, because they do a lot of praying and they always beg the wife. That's how it's supposed to be. With that concludes our forum. Thank you very much, from the moderator. Thank you, audience. Thank you, elders, visitors, chiefs, and councils. Everybody going to watch this on different parts, YouTube, and see you guys. And have a good luck to all candidates. And thank you for coming here. Thank you, Tsuut'ina Nation and Planning Committee to get me. Thank you.